Hi team, Coach Chicken Legs here to help you improve your programming as a PT and as a coach. Today we're gonna look at how to recover a client and stay in our scope of practice. You're probably shit at it, let's fix that, let's go. So team, we must be so careful when we're doing recovery for our clients. It is very easy to fall out of our scope of practice, which is absolutely not what we wanna do. As we improve our programming capacities, we're gonna start looking at how to rehab and how to prevent injury in clients, which is a must. You must know how to do that. But you must also remember that even if you're getting more educated in the space, you are not a physio, you're not an exercise physiologist, and you really need to stay in your lane. It's okay to palm people off if they're at a point of concern, and that's okay. We're gonna start with things that you must not touch, client. You must not touch these if the client is presenting these things. Please palm them off to a trusted health professional and keep that happy loop system happening where they send you people and vice versa. If your client's range of motion when you have a joint is less than 30% of what you would like to see it at, of what expected. So if I get this hinge joint at the elbow of my client, of Napoleon here, and he can only do this much movement because he's in pain, he is a red flag client. Do not touch him, do not try to rehab him, send him off to a health professional, refer him out. It is not worth it. Seriously, I cannot stress enough how little worth it is. I don't care. If you end up hurting that client, your professional career is done. Your credibility is done. Stay in your lane. That's the first thing. Second thing, if your client is in pain outside of exercise, what does that mean? It means if my client's having trouble sleeping because their shoulder keeps them up at night, I would be really reluctant to help them. I might even put them in a red flag category where we do not help that client, refer them out. Any pain that's developed from chronically that they're always experiencing is well beyond your scope of practice. And without a scan, you don't even know what's going on, let alone trying to have a stab at fixing it. So please God, don't do that. If they're in pain outside of exercise, like I'm saying it again, if they're in pain chronically all the time, like their lower back is always sore, I would be massively reluctant to do it, particularly if they've had a major injury in the past. Here's another thing you must be very cautious of. If they've had a major injury or they've got lower back pain and they haven't yet been cleared by the physio, you cannot even attempt to help them. Now, if they have been cleared by physio and the physio has said, go to a coach to help lose some weight so the back pain's less, that's a different story. But if a client comes to you and they have these chronic issues and they haven't been seen a physio and certainly haven't been cleared by one, they are a no-touch zone. Do not help them, please. Does that make sense? Stay in your scope of practice or increase your scope of practice. Get rehab qualifications so that way you can help those issues if that's something you find is stopping your business from progressing. If you don't have that problem yet, don't worry about it. Let's just worry about normal rehab stuff that we as trainers are allowed to do and stay in our scope of practice. So team, there are two types of recovery that we're gonna look at and that we're allowed to play with, okay? There's active recovery and passive recovery. Active and passive. Passive recovery we're gonna look at first because it's the easiest one for people to understand. Passive means not doing anything, hanging out. So stuff like massages, saunas, spas, these are all, muscle guns. These are all passive, where something else is helping you relax. These are fantastic tools to get clients to do outside of your gym time because they don't need you to do it and it's really relaxing for them. And I'll tell you what, they're probably more likely to do this because they don't have to do any work. You might provide big Normatec sleeves, which is a good investment for you if you're gonna start developing your clients, which are big sleeves you put on your arms and legs that compresses you. Client can sit there for an hour as that machine does the work to recover them for you. So good, they're fantastic. You as a trainer or someone who's actually training yourself might find that you love this form of recovery. Massive and awesome, and probably the best thing to give clients to do in their own time, because they're far more likely to do it than active. Active recovery means something that you yourself are doing to recover yourself. So it might be stuff like stretching, it might be rehabilitation movements, it might be functional training movements, it might be doing foam rolling on certain spots, it might be doing voodoo flossing on certain spots. These things are all active. And although are incredibly efficient, I have found in my experience, clients are apprehensive to do if you're not there enforcing the rules. So you must enforce the rules, or enforce the rules. That's where we use active recovery. It's not like those people who are doing yoga by themselves, that's awesome, but more often than not, you have to go to a class because the motivation's not just there. You want to be guided. So passive, again, is when something is doing the work for you, and active is when you are doing the work yourself. And active is when you're actually doing the work with a trainer, or you're helping the client with the work, okay? Active and passive. So we're gonna focus mainly on active, because that's where your client's gonna need you the most. Hey team, if you're liking this content, what I need you to do is follow us, support us, leave comments. We're here to help programmers be better at programming, make coaches and PTs the best of the best that we can, and it starts with programming and it starts with you. Share, like, subscribe. I have a really straightforward system that I use when looking at rehabbing, recovery, and injury prevention in warm-ups and in recovery sessions for clients, while still staying in scope of practice, which in this case is the key. I first look at what is the main movement of the session, or the main movement my client is struggling with. We know the movements that we've discussed in previous episodes. If you haven't seen those episodes, do go back and watch them. But we'll talk about them quickly here. We have push, pull, plank, squat, lunge, hinge, ground to standing, crawl, and gait. Gait just being walking, anytime your feet are being used. Crawl, being a crawl. Ground to standing, anytime you're coming from the ground to the feet, think burpee. Hinge being a deadlift movement, anytime your body is hinging without your legs doing much work. Or lunge, legs separated, knee joints moving. Squat, legs together, knee joints moving. Plank is when your body's holding itself on an angle, where your plank has to be active. Pull, when you bring something towards you, and push when you bring yourself away. My first step is what is the days trying to do of these 9 things? Is it a push-pull plank day? Is it just a push day? Is it a squat day? Is it a leg day? What is the main thing I'm looking for? Is my client restricted in the squat? Is my client restricted in the lower limb, in the upper limb, whatever? From there, I look at my next step. So step 1, identify the movements of the day. Step 2, what joints are related around that movement? So usually we have ankles, these are all the best ones. Knees, hips, spine, shoulders, and elbows. Those are our main guys we look at. Outside of that space, team, it starts getting really technical. And if your client's having issues outside of that space, I would consider sending them off to a professional or to a specialist, because outside of this space, we start dipping outside of our scope of practice. We want to kind of stay in this range, because all we're going to do, we are not going to recommend anything. We're not going to prescribe anything. We're going to now do step 3. Step 3 is I'm going to ask them, we're going to identify what are the muscles above and below that joint that's causing them a bit of issue, or that we're trying to rehab, or that we're trying to work in their session. Okay? So again, if we're trying to make sure their shoulders are a bit strong or stronger because they're having issues with overhead press, or they're having issues with tennis elbow or lifter's elbow, which is incredibly common in our industry, and we'll use that as an example. We're going to look at what are the muscles above the elbow and below. So above the elbow, we've got our biceps and our triceps, and below the elbow, we might have our forearms. Okay? So identify what's above it and what's below it. Now I'm gonna ask my client, what's tight? Most people will know. It's much easier to identify what's tight than what isn't. So I might say, oh geez, my forearm's tight. It's always been tight. I have issues with tight forearms. So now we know what's tight. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna loosen the tight shit, loosen, tight, and tighten the loose. So I'm gonna foam roll, I'm gonna voodoo floss, I'm gonna pressure point ball, I'm gonna massage gun, I'm gonna stretch the spots that are tight. I'm gonna encourage the client to do that. I'm not gonna do any of it myself. The client always handles their own body. I never touch them. They do the work. And I give them some suggestions. I say, hey, here are 3 things. Here's a stretch, here's a pressure point ball, here's a foam roller. Try which of these things out and see if any of them are help with your elbow pain. They do it. They find that, yeah, the foam roller didn't really do much. The pressure point ball worked a little bit, but geez, that stretch helped out. Cool. Staying in scope of practice, you might say, maybe it's worth looking into doing that stretch more often. Or you might program it into their program more often to help offset that elbow. That's staying within scope. We're not prescribing anything. I'm not saying that that movement is 100% the thing causing the issue. We've made an observation that when they stretched their forearm, it made the pain lessen. Okay, we might then stretch that forearm in the same way more often. Who would have thought? Then I'm gonna tighten the loose stuff. So we might find that they've had historically weak biceps, and they'll tell you that. The clients are pretty intuitive with their own body. Or you might be able to see just from a aesthetic point of view, they have massive forearms from years of being a bricklayer, but really small biceps and shoulders. So we might decide to strengthen up the bicep a little bit, introduce a bit of rotational movement, and try a bit of transverse movement, which is a secondary video we've been working on, and strengthen those biceps up and see, did that help the client? They might say, well, not really, it didn't really make a difference. Cool, how about we try strengthening the tricep? Ooh, that really didn't do much either. Okay, well, how about we try to do some supinated curls and some pronated curls? Oh shit, both of those made my elbow feel really, really good. Maybe it's a good idea for that client to do a little bit more of that in their dedicated recovery spaces, in their recovery seasons, or even in their warm-ups. Maybe, I don't know, but staying in scope of practice, we're just suggesting things. So, what are easy steps when we're trying to do warm-ups that are targeting specific niggles the client's having, recovery seasons or recovery sessions? I'm looking at what's the main movement of our 9 we discussed, what joints are the main joints that are being used in those sessions, in those movements, and you'll know because it's the main thing that's moving. We're then gonna look at what's tight. We're gonna look at what's above and what's below that joint. Then, finally, we're gonna loosen the tight shit and tighten the loose shit. Let's look at a lower limb day as another example to really try to drill this into you guys. My client might have really sore lower back. Now, I go, right, what's the main movements of a lower back? Well, hinging. They might have a hinge day that I've got planned for them, and I'm concerned that the lower back's gonna get in the way. Or I might find that I haven't been able to do hinge movements, and I haven't been able to do lunge movements because the lower back has been a factor. They've been cleared by physio. The pain doesn't hurt them outside of the gym. It's just a restriction for us in the day-to-day. This is a great space for us to play. I might say, right, hinging and squatting seems to be the problem. What are the muscles? What are the joints around those movements? Well, the knee, the hip, and the spine. Well, let's just do one at a time. What's above and below the knee? Quads, hamstrings are above, tibularis anterior and calf are below. Now, I might ask the client, hey, what's tight? Do you find that when you're doing the squat, what muscle feels tight when you do that? They, well, my lower back and my quad. Okay, let's voodoo floss the quad. Let's muscle gun the quad. Let's loosen it up. Let's do some foam rolling and then assess if that has helped their movement pattern at all. They might say, yeah, it feels a little bit better. Okay, we might ask them if anything's loose, is anything weak? And they might say, I have historically weak hamstrings. A good indicator is if they can't flex the muscle consciously. So if they're having issue flexing the muscle, their mind to muscle connection's not there, that could be an indicator that the muscle might not be as strong as some of the more dominant ones that they work on, that they can physically clench. They can physically cavalier squeeze, if you want some technical terminology. That's a really good indicator that we have an imbalance of mind to muscle connection. So you might do some drills in your warm-up or in your recovery or learning phase of your sessions to strengthen up the hamstring and see, does it make the client feel better or worse? We're just doing an observation. If the client says, oh, that doesn't really do much, or it hurts, we stop it, we cut it, and we move to the next thing. Again, we're not physios. If the client says, hey, geez, that makes my leg feel better, maybe introduce those movements a little bit more often. But what you're probably gonna find is just the loosening phase of this system is gonna do more for you than anything else. Because when you ask your client, how often are you doing active stretching? How often are you doing active recovery? How often are you even doing passive recovery? Almost always the client's gonna say none. That's just from experience. Your pro athletes and your guys who take it really seriously are very, very focused on their after session recovery, particularly bodybuilders, because the pro level bodybuilders understand that as I tear muscle apart, to grow it, it shrinks in this direction because the muscle's healing shorter than when it was torn. Because as I'm pumping, the muscle rips, then it grows over itself. So my job as a bodybuilder is to make sure I'm always lengthening that muscle back out so I don't lose my mobility and start getting shortened muscles so you get those like concave shoulder kind of looks. So I might introduce those kind of stretches around the muscles they're trying to train in their recovery and in their warm-ups. So let's summarize. 2 types of recovery. There's 2 things we're looking for when we're building our training programs. We're looking for active recovery, passive recovery. Passive, I often ask the client to do outside of our time, and active I often do with my client regularly, one-to-one or in a group setting, because I know they wouldn't do it in any other time. I usually keep the recovery sessions localized to the warm-up and the cool-down because most people don't enjoy it as much because it doesn't give you the sweat. So if I can do it a little bit in my warm-up and cool-down that we will learn about later in the videos, we can offset some of the issues they're running into before they even run into them, or we can start producing more flexibility and more functionality, more pain-resistant, long, unbreakable client without them even realizing it, because we're just trickling in their vegetables into their spaghetti without them even noticing, right? Or I might use these principles around a whole recovery session with my client's inability to do something during an on-season or during an off-season or a time where we're allowed to take a step back. Let's say our client's really deconditioned. I might spend 3 months just doing sessions around getting the clients loose enough to be able to do patterns, these 9 movement patterns, and strong enough so that they can support the movements. And since they're deconditioned, that will be a workout in itself. So that's what I want you to start thinking about, team. Recovery is a little bit more tricky because it's open-ended. You're kind of working like a detective, trying to sniff out things that might be restricting your client from doing work. So a lot of the time it's lifestyle. That's okay. Remember that you can't offset, your only concern is what they're doing in the gym. If the client's got lower back pain and they sit 8 hours a day and then they go home and sit down for another 8 and then they go to bed, okay, well, it's hard to offset that from a training point of view, but it does give us a really good indicator of what might be the joints that are being affected, that need to be loosened and tightened. Okay? Because our movement patterns are so good because they tell us where problems are. They tell us where the strength is lacking, and they tell us where the recovery needs to happen. So, because pain will be a good indicator of restriction when we're performing these movement patterns. We then look at which joint is the most relative joint around those movement patterns, and then we look what's the muscle above it, below it, and then how can I loosen the tight shit and tighten the loose shit. I do not tighten something first before I've loosened the thing that's getting in the way. I don't know if a client's shoulder mobility has improved if I'm tightening their subscapularis or their back to be able to perform this movement because it's weak, if I haven't loosened the pec, the lat, and the shoulder, even perhaps the rotator cuff, because those are the things that are getting in the way originally. They might not have an issue with strength, they might just have an issue with tightness. Most of the time, remember, just performing loosening drills, stretch, doing passive, doing active recovery will give your client massive results anyway. But we need to identify which spots we're trying to loosen, which is why I have this 4-step system. Identify the main movement they're doing, which joints are involved in that movement or movements, what's the muscles above and below it, loosen the tight shit, tighten the loose shit. Those are your 4 steps. Learn it, team. I want you as to practice writing down all the main movement patterns, writing down the joints that are related to them, write down the muscles that you can think of that are above and below each, and then what you could do with a foam roller, a pressure point ball, a muscle gun, or a voodoo floss band or a resistance band to help loosen those joints up, those muscles up. That's a hell of a list, team. But if you have that in your back pocket, you can deal with almost all the situations that generally will come across your desk as a trainer. Again, please do stay in scope, but this stuff is gonna change the game for you, because all of a sudden you can start not only getting clients results, but also helping them to function and feel better in their movements with less pain, more flexibility, and more longevity in mind so they can train for longer. Keep curious, practice this stuff, do the things I tell you, and write out as many examples as you can. Send them to me, I love seeing them. And until next time, get after it, pay it forward, help the person next to you, and let's be 1% coaches.